Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this first webinar on Zero Debris and specifically on the Zero Debris Technical Booklet. My name is Quentin Verspiren. I'm the coordinator of the Protect Accelerator, which is the initiative under which this project of Zero Debris Charter and all follow-on activities have been initiated. So it's truly a pleasure to see so many of you joining us. I think it's a testament to the quick growth of the Zero Debris community. And before starting with all the speakers and the actual interesting part of the program, I would like, for those of you who may be new to the Zero Debris community, who have not necessarily been part of its early steps, to say a few words about these. So next slide, please. So the foundation of all our activities here is the Zero Debris Charter that itself originates from a more general approach that we call the Zero Debris approach. So at the ESA Ministerial in 2022, the ministers of ESA member states asked ESA to implement a zero debris approach for its missions and to encourage partners and other actors to pursue similar paths. So a dual mandate received from the minister, one of internal transformation, the ESA zero debris approach. This involves activities throughout the agency to help us transform the way we design our satellite, we conduct space operations, how we dispose of satellites after their end of life, etc., etc., and a community approach to encourage partners and other actors to pursue similar paths. And what was extremely important when at ESA we started thinking about this second part of the mandate, the encouragement to partners and other actors, is the end of the sentence, similar path. The idea was not to say ESA is approaching zero debris that way, let's have the rest of the community simply subscribing to that and following whatever we would like to suggest. On the contrary, what was important was for us to understand what would be the interest, the appetite, the need, and the priorities of the community on something like zero debris. And for that, we decided to support the drafting of a community vision. So by the community, for the community. That was really the motto then. And as part of the Protect Accelerator, a recent ESA initiative, we convened various workshops where approximately 40 organizations, ESA being one of them, one voice among these 40, co-drafted a 2-page document, 3 principles, 5 technical targets that we decided to call collectively the Zero Debris Charter. So it is an important milestone towards space debris mitigation and remediation, in the sense that it is one of the first time where the community was able to express its priorities on a completely open and collaborative basis. And this is truly the strength of this initiative. It's really by the community, for the community. Next slide, please. And this shows actually in where we are with the charter. What started as a document drafted by around 40 organizations, mostly European, has now been signed by 163, even 65, I think, as this morning, organizations from 33 countries, including 20 governments that have signed at the level of the government. So I think this is the demonstration that this text of the charter goes way beyond the views and positions of these initial 40 co-drafters, but is now truly representative of the space community, the global space community as a whole, who considers that achieving zero debris by 2030 is an absolute priority to ensure safe, sustainable, and prosperous space operations. And the next step after the charter was to think about concrete avenues to realize that vision. And these concrete avenues are the Zero Debris Technical Booklet. And I will now let those who have been the most active behind the booklet, some of the pillars of the working group, tell you more about what is the booklet, how it was developed, for what purpose, basically everything you need to know now that this booklet has been released. So once more, thank you for showing up in such a huge number. I see now that we just reached 80 participants to this call. This is truly impressive, and I think this demonstrates that this is an important topic for all of us. So thank you for joining, and I very much look forward to all the presentations that we'll have today.
Thank you very much, Quentin. Okay, now we will have the first keynote. Zaya, please, can you share your screen and present your presentation? Thank you very much.
Yes, happy to do so. Let's just figure out the technology side of things. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Yes, thumbs up. Perfect. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for that great introduction, Quentin. That just gave a really good overview as to the zero debris approach in general. The keynote that I'm going to be giving is really to provide an overview of the technical booklet's purpose and content, focusing on some of the key challenges we had, some of the proposed technical solutions, and the critical enablers that we need to be able to achieve a zero debris future by 2030. So I'm Zaria, I'm from Astroscale. I'm a product strategy engineer there. So generally I kind of sit as an engineer in the business development team and work closely with policy. But today it's all focusing on the technical. And just a quick shout out to Callum as well for letting me steal and repurpose some of his slides as well. Okay, so the purpose of the technical booklet itself was to help us achieve the targets and principles that we've set forward in the Zero Debris Charter. We defined them collaboratively, and they're there to help us achieve a zero debris by 2030. But as part of this booklet, we focus really on the technical developments. It's not really meant to cover legal, regulatory, political, and financial aspects, although those were incredibly hard to detangle from the text itself. For the benefit of everyone, this is led by the Zero Debris community stakeholders. So it was an open and collaborative process to develop this, with ESA being one of the key contributors and facilitators to help us get together and put this together. And then lastly, it's one of the other things that it's meant to do, apart from just being a technical booklet, was also to reinforce this zero debris community. So as part of the charter, we really wanted to foster a community of proactive actors working together to actually make sure that the targets that we jointly identified were met. So we had an initial draft of the technical booklet. So that was just text-based. We had inputs from over 36 organizations, 32 of them being European. It was a ton of data that we actually ended up getting in. We then took that data to a workshop that was held in ESOC in June of last year. And that was really to discuss the technical content. So that was an intense 2 days, very long 2 days, going with over 90 representatives from industry, really going through every detail of what we wanted to include in the technical booklet, what we wanted it to be, what we wanted it to look like, what the scope of it is, and what it was really trying to achieve. After those 2 days, we had, again, a lot of data. So we had an editorial group that we ended up setting up over the summer that could really go through the outputs of the workshop and get some agreement on the content and the structure of what we're putting together for the booklet. After a lot of emails, a lot of Excel sheets, a lot of meetings, we were then finally ready to present what we called our kind of final draft of this technical booklet at a workshop in ESTech on the 11th of October. So that was really a chance for everybody to dot the I's, to cross the T's, to make sure that everything that we wanted in this booklet was represented. And then the editorial group still had a bit of work to do, just to make sure that the technical booklet is presentable and that it contains all of the inputs that we wanted. And then finally, we presented a first issue of this technical booklet to the Zero Debris community on the 15th of January. One thing that I really wanted to stress is that this is meant to be a living document. The charter was only 2 pages long. It's set, these are the targets and the principles that we want to work towards for 2030. But this technical booklet is much longer. It's meant to be a snapshot of the community's thoughts and the community's ambitions towards Zero Debris. So again, just to reiterate again, it's a technical booklet is technically focused, as the name suggests. It's non-binding and it's very collaborative. It's meant to be very ambitious. It's meant to be a resource for us to know where we want to direct our research and our future technology developments towards to achieve this goal of zero debris by 2030. So the booklet, if you go through it, it contains an introduction. This just gives some context, background and scope on the project. It gives a description and a glossary. The glossary, is very specific to the technical booklet itself. I think depending on where you're from or what standards you use or what policies you're reading, one word or one phrase can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So this was really just to make sure that we're as clear as possible on the intent in the Zero Debris booklet. We then have our technical chapters. So each technical chapter is structured in a set of needs, then a set of solutions to be able to meet those needs, and then finally specific key enablers that will help us develop those solutions. And then lastly, we have an additional kind of standalone chapter on the vision for a circular economy in space. So as we were going through a lot of these zero debris options, in-orbit servicing, circular economy, all of these kind of phrases kept popping up. And we knew that while it wasn't in the scope of what we wanted to do by 2030, it was still something that we needed to start considering now. The impacts and the risks of things like assembly, manufacturing, recycling in space, all of those things to do with unknown demisability of structures, anything like that will really need to be understood and mitigated. And the mitigation of space debris, which we really discuss in this technical booklet, will be, if anything, more important than ever when we start to make this vision into a reality. So to get into the actual content of the technical booklet. So we have 6 different chapters, technical chapters. They're not currently structured in the way that the charter is structured, just because there's so much back and forth between the different chapters. So this was just to make it easy to read, easy to understand, kind of putting it into these different categories. So the first one is to prevent the release of debris. So that's split into avoiding unintentional release of debris in orbit and also avoiding intentional release of debris in orbit. So for unintentional release, it's really about the characterization and aggregation of materials, learning more about that, developing and using technologies that will minimize the release of debris. And specifically, we had one solution around the propulsive and pyrotechnic technologies that avoid the release of small particles. For intentionally released debris, we focus really on launchers being designed to contain their mission-related objects. So things like launch structures, dummy masses, adapters, all things like that. And then we looked at the design and development of adopting deorbit systems for these mission-related objects. The next chapter was all about guaranteeing timely and successful clearance. So this is really about making sure that we improve orbital clearance with a high probability of successful deorbiting. So that is really the spacecraft itself being able to remove itself from orbit, preparing objects for removal, and then also demonstrating some of these removal services. So really, we're starting at the start. We want the development and adoption of safe and reliable deorbiting systems. We want to make sure that we have the development, validation, and adoption of health monitoring systems to help us track the health of our satellite throughout its lifetime, and then verification of some of these methods for timely and successful clearance, since they can vary from operator to operator. So it's really trying to get verifications of these methods. The next thing was about preparing space objects for removal. So that's largely on having interoperable interfaces and requirements that will facilitate the removal of objects in future if they can't remove themselves. And this also ties in closely with some of those disposal strategies. And then lastly, we had being able to demonstrate these removal services. So really it's about improving characterization of objects to be removed. So knowing a lot more about the structural integrity of the space object before you're actually going to remove it. The development of technologies for rendezvous and capture, which is critical to these future removal services. And then finally, just being able to mature the removal ecosystem as a whole. And then our third chapter is on preventing the debris generation through breakups and collision. So this was quite a long chapter, and a lot of really good content in here. But really, it's about helping us improve the way that we do collision risk assessment. So coming up with a standardized methodology for that, a standardized methodology not only for how we calculate collision risks, but also for assessing the consequences of collisions and breakups through modeling. We also wanted to see standardized evaluation of implied and encountered risks. So this is really just being able to develop this kind of standardized sets of methods for assessing the likelihood and severity of debris generation events, and developing a robust system to be able to optimize the space environment. We also had improving the collision avoidance capabilities during the design stage. So that is improving the ability of the spacecraft itself to be able to avoid collisions, and the development of some of these autonomous systems for conjunction detection and collision avoidance. For minimizing risks linked to untrackable objects, what we really wanted to do there was the development of improved statistical models to be able to evaluate the behavior of untrackable objects in space, and then the mitigation solutions as well, including being able to improve spacecraft design and protection against some of those small particles that you just can't avoid. And then lastly, for the chapter, it's about minimizing the risks of internal breakups. So really it's about understanding, making improved and reliable models for modeling internal breakups, adoption of technologies for reliable passivation, and the development of passive containment technologies for sources of on-stored energy. So halfway through, our fourth chapter was on improving space traffic surveillance and coordination. So that's really, it sounds less technical, but it's something that kept popping up, which was improving space traffic coordination and information sharing. It was something where I think this chapter had a lot of back and forth because it feels as though it's non-technical, but being able to get closer international collaboration and transparency in some of the data we're sharing is going to be critical to helping us understand that environment as a whole a lot better. So for this, it was a lot about improving space surveillance performance. So that's on the technology itself to be able to track space debris. Enhancing correlation and uncertainty quantification methods. So again, this is something that kept popping up, just getting a consensus on what the best methodologies going forward would be. And then, just tracking of larger catalogs. So it's really trying to bring together the different sources of space surveillance data and having this kind of informative hub. Preventing casualties on ground is pretty self-explanatory. What we really wanted to focus on was reducing the risk linked to uncontrolled reentry and then reducing the impacts of controlled reentry. So for uncontrolled reentry, that's all about design for demise, making sure that we understand that process better, making sure that we develop techniques and processes for a system and subsystem level to be able to create demisable objects. And then also evaluating the reentry and disposal methods, focusing on safety, operation, and technical feasibility. For controlled reentry, that's a whole another kind of topic to think about. So it's the development of adaptable spacecraft architectures that can actually accommodate reentry, active control reentry, and also development of effective technologies to reduce the risk of debris generation and on-ground casualties in general. And lastly, we have our being able to understand and mitigate adverse consequences of space objects and debris. So really, this is about understanding the environmental impacts that come from reentry and protecting our dark and quiet skies. So for environmental impacts, that's characterization of materials used in space and in spacecraft at the moment, and their behavior during reentry and assessing their environmental impact. So it's really looking at that in terms of, the atmosphere, in terms of effects on terrestrial and oceanic environments, and just being able to have a look at this. And then for our protecting our dark and quiet skies, that is the prediction and mitigation of unintended emissions, but also the prediction of interference caused by intended emissions to protect our dark and quiet skies. So that's probably a lot of information in a very short period of time. But the booklet has really been written in such a way that it should be kind of easy to identify where the information that you're looking for as an operator, as a regulator, as a manufacturer of spacecraft, where the information needed to you can be found. Just as a quick example of how we're implementing the zero debris approach at Astroscale, we're actually involved in developing a mission with ESA at the moment for in-orbit refurbishment and upgrading service. And the difference being, now that we have this booklet and now that we have this charter, it just serves as a nice baseline for being able to design our mission from the start to be working towards zero debris by 2030. So examples of this are on, for example, the prevention of release of debris. So when you're docking with a client, even if it's a cooperative client, you're performing a lot of complex operations. So there's a lot in that chapter on the prevention of debris. That covers, how do we go about this? How do we go about ensuring that our operations doesn't further generate debris? Then on the guarantee and timely successful clearance of orbits, it's really about design for removal. It's the docking interface that we're using to be able to dock to our clients will also potentially in future be used to remove a client if they're unable to remove themselves. And then finally, preventing casualty risks on ground. So now that we're coming up with this idea of refurbishment and upgrading, we're creating these containerized modules that will have to be swapped out. And if the client spacecraft, for example, is going to be performing an uncontrolled reentry, we need to make sure that these are designed for demise. So a lot of really relevant information in the technical booklet on that as well. So to close out, really, I just wanted to say that, in Astroscale, we always talk about the space policy quagmire. I think as a community, we all want to aim for the safe, secure, and responsible and sustainable access to space. But especially when it comes to debris mitigation, there's just such a broad range of regulations, policies, guidelines, other kind of non-binding instruments, and each have their own agenda, their own ambitions, priorities, and interpretations. So for the Zero Debris Charter, we really tried to focus on establishing this as a non-legally binding charter, but one of its main goals was to foster this community that we have online today. And the idea was that this wasn't going to be just a to-do list of this is what we want to do over the next few years. It's really ambitious targets and measurable targets for 2030. And as that, as well as the tech set itself, we're determined to lead it by example. The technical booklet itself is it's a selection of the technical needs, solution, and key enablers that we need to achieve the targets of the Zero Debris Charter. So they're technically focused, non-binding. It's very cross-cutting. You'll see there's tons of references from one section to another, very collaborative and complementary. We tried as much as possible to continue to use the language that you find in other policies and other non-binding instruments out there to make sure that it supplements. It doesn't, contradict. It doesn't try to replace anything that's already out there. This is just a snapshot of how we think we can achieve a zero debris future. And that is it for me today. So this was the lovely team at ESOC when we were putting together the first draft of the technical booklet. Again, it's a living document. I'm sure we'll hear all about what the next steps for this is going to be shortly. But get involved. It's been a great community and it's been a lot of work to put this together, but I think the end result speaks for itself.
Thank you very much, Zaya, for this very clear presentation of the Zero Debris Charter as a living document, and for the example you provided on how Astroscale is already using it. Before we move on to the next keynote, I wanted to remind all participants that there will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and that they are already they can already write down every questions they have in the dedicated Q&A section. For the next keynote, we will have Kate that will dive a bit further on how to use the booklet and its technical content to shape strategies to foster innovation and to drive collaborative initiatives.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, and also thank you to Zaria for your presentation. I think it's good to have a good overview of the booklet before we dive into a little bit more on the implementation side. But yes, so my name is Kate, and I will be presenting today basically some implementation points that we're doing at OHB, our general strategy in using the booklet, and also the different opportunities that we see in using it as a charter signatory. So first, before we begin, I'll just give a little introduction about myself. So I work at OHB System AG, which is in Bremen in Germany. And here I'm space systems engineer, space debris systems engineer. So I work in the pre-development department, which focuses on phase 0 to B1 of the satellite design process. And my focus specifically is on the space safety missions. So of course, with the new ESA space debris mitigation requirements and also the incoming work that we've been doing on the charter and also in the Zero Debris Technical Booklet, this is something that I've been deeply involved in and we see coming up a lot in our early phase of mission design. In addition to that, I'm also the co-coordinator of the Space Debris Center of Competence at OHB, which I'll give a little bit of background later, but is basically one of the methods in which we're able to implement and discuss these strategies. And in my involvement in the Zero Debris Booklet was that I was the industry chair for Chapter 5 specifically, so preventing casualties on ground. So these sessions that we did at ESOC that Zaria just mentioned, I co-chaired with one ESA representative as well, and then was a part of the editorial sessions that occurred later that year in October. So for those who may not know, as a little bit of a background, so OHB System is the headquarters that we have here in Bremen. Basically, we do large systems integration for larger satellite platforms primarily. So we have a clean room in our facility, and this is where we have most of our integration activities. And just as a little bit of summary, the different types of projects that we work on. I mentioned that I focus on space safety, but of course at the company, which is quite large, we're doing all sorts of different missions from Earth observation, science, telecom, nav, reconnaissance as well. So even though space safety is of course where we might primarily focus deeply, we know that the idea of a zero debris future is also important for all types of missions that we have in space. So this is why we believe also at OHB, with our clean space vision, that this is a really important topic that we want to stay at the forefront of and also make sure that we're developing towards, because like Zaria said, which I think was a really good statement, is that we want to protect space and we want to be able to keep using it. Like, that is very important for all of us as members of the space industry, of course. So I'll just give a little bit of background about the Space Debris Center of Competence. So this is something that I'm co-coordinating with my boss as well, Charlotte Buick. And here what's really important is that we basically have this working group that we have within OHB, where we're touching on majority of these topics that you see on the slide. So how do we protect our satellites from space debris? How do we make them more resilient? Through what methods? How are we doing our collision avoidance maneuvers? How do we avoid creating new space debris? So how can we be more resilient? How are we passivating our spacecraft? When we're disposing, are we able to meet the timely clearance goals that are set not only in the requirements, but also maybe even in these future zero debris goals as well? Then we have, of course, what would be considered preventing casualties on ground, so minimizing the risk to people and our Earth infrastructure. So in the times when we have uncontrolled reentry, what kind of design for demise technologies are we developing? Are we aware of? Can we utilize? And then lastly, which has become more important, I'd say, in the most recent years, especially with respect to constellations. So not as large of a concern on OHB's side yet, but of course reducing the impact for astronomical observations. So how can we keep an exchange with the astronomical community is something that we had been trying to keep up with before. And now, of course, with the Zero Debris booklet, we're able to directly discuss with the people in this community who had representatives within the sessions, which is really useful. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So here in our Space Debris Center of Competence, it's not only me, it's a bunch of different experts that we have at OHB that touch on the range of these topics. We discuss this also mission specific, but also from a research and development side. What do we see as being critical and what can we develop at OHB to help facilitate this? So here's some general steps on the booklet implementation that we've done so far. So before the release of the booklet, Zaria explained all the workshops. There was also a collection of input that was done. So we led this collection of input through majority of our Space Debris Center, but also through key people in our company, so different department heads for critical subsystems that might have been mentioned within the booklet. Once the booklet was released, we started with an internal distribution. So we basically have some internal sites within OHB in which we were posting about the booklet to encourage people to read. Also, personally, I did quite a bit of follow-up with different people in key departments and key experts also within our Space Debris Center of Competence saying, hey, we have this booklet, take a look at it, let me know what you think. And some of the feedback that we got right off the back was, okay, wow, this is a lot of stuff. Like, how are we going to be able to implement this? How can we do all of this? And in the end, this is really, like Zaria mentioned, a baseline. So it gives us the what we would like to do, which is, this is a set of goals that we can't guarantee are achievable by 2030, but this is where we're striving to achieve. And it doesn't define how we're going to do it. So as a company, it may not be that we touch on all of the different areas of the booklet, because for us as a large system integrators, there are some areas in which we might find that we have more expertise to contribute to, and some where it's not necessarily as detailed of our area. So it's not that we made the booklet expecting that every individual company is able to touch on every single topic, but really that we have a community that can touch across all of these topics. So again, I think that's a big lessons learned that we had, was to remind people that, of course, the booklet is the what and not the how, and it really allows us to define this large space that we have, which previously felt a little bit wishy-washy and unknown, but now we have a set of targets that we can all work towards. So for our current implementation, right now, basically the Zero Debris booklet, we've been using it as a source of inspiration on one of our projects, which is with ESA, the Large LEO Zero Debris platform. So of course, even in the name, you can see it's quite related. Where there, we also have some far-reaching future goals on how to make a Earth observation platform between 500 to 1,000 kilograms to be demisable. Sorry, not demisable, but that's one of the topics. How we can define this platform to be maybe more debris resilient, to be demisable as one of them, should it be an uncontrolled reentry. And so right now this booklet serves as a good baseline, but also an inspiration for different areas of expertise that we might want to dive into. And even from the initial workshops that we had at ESOC and also at STech in the year, it also gave us a good idea of who else is in the community and maybe who can we collaborate with on certain areas where, as a large systems integrator, we're not the experts. So that's basically on our current implementation. And then for our next steps, of course, would be road mapping activities. So this is something where we're taking a look at the critical areas that are of interest to develop on OHB side, and we're linking that to upcoming activities and upcoming research and development projects that we have going on internally, alongside other different projects like the Large LEO Zero Debris platform, for example. So that's a little bit of an example from our next steps. And of course, in general, we would want to then use these road mapping and development activities into other future projects. It wouldn't only be the one that we have ongoing now, but of course, we're starting somewhere, and this is a pretty good starting point. Then on the opportunities, so I think it's already been alluded a little bit, but there are lots of opportunities with the booklet. We really see it as a systems problem. This is how I like to define it, because, you know, as each satellite, you have critical subsystems, and they all work together. They need to communicate. It's the same thing here that we have with this Zero Debris initiative, where there are lots of different key areas in which we've identified drivers. We have the needs, solutions, the enablers, and there's a lot of overlap in a lot of areas where we see that there needs to be collaboration or maybe even more communication onto what these inputs and these outputs would be. So where can we cover these gaps? What can we provide as LSIs possibly to other companies, and vice versa, to be able to tackle these challenges and close as many gaps that we've seen either directly in one chapter or even as the chapters overlap, for example. I think something else that was really beneficial within this booklet, attending the sessions and also reading through the chapters, was that we get a clear idea of what the state of the art is in all of these areas. So, for example, we are not a large satellite constellations operator, but then through these conversations, we get a sense of, okay, what are the challenges that the operators face when it comes to space traffic and space surveillance, and how does that link back to the communication systems that we have on board, and is there anything there in which maybe there could be a benefit? So I think that's just one small example of these different types of overlaps that we have. So working with the Zero Debris community, I think for us presents a lot of opportunities for future development in these previously mentioned R&D projects that we're going to be looking into, because we need to be working together basically in order to achieve this large goal that we've set, which I think is an important goal. But it's not something that can be done on the back of one actor, whether that's one company, one large systems integrator, or even ESA. It's not something that one group can achieve without the inputs from everyone else. So this was just a quick introduction on how we're doing some implementation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very, very much for this presentation, highlighting the different opportunities offered by the Zero Debris Technical Booklet. The next keynote will be presented by Thiago. He will detail a bit more the process, the collaborative process that led to this charter, and will also explain what could be the next steps and how to get involved in this Zero Debris initiative in the future. And I remind everyone that they can put their questions in the Q&A section. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha, for the introduction. I hope everybody can see my screen. It's a bit hard to know in this webinar format, so if there is any thumbs up, it would be helpful, actually. Yes, there is. Good. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'll try to give you an overview of how we got here and where we go next before we start with a Q&A session. And to start with that, and I think it's always good to recall quickly how we got here, because it will inform us not very, very closely to what will happen next. as was introduced before, there was for sure the beginning of it all. That was this initiative that stemmed from our mandate in ISA in 2022 ministerial to start working with the community and to encourage others to also go towards the zero debris approach. And that was what was implemented and, in my opinion, very successfully achieved with the beginning of the zero debris charter and the preparation of it and publishing already within 2023, so in less than 1 year. That was extremely important for us, because that was really telling us where we want to be in 2030 as a community altogether, trying to really become change the paradigm by which we were working and seeing space sustainability in the future. And as Quentin mentioned, this has been increasingly successful, because we started with about 40 organizations, and by now we have more than 160 signatories, and it's increasing by the day. There are 20 countries and national agencies that have also signed the charter, so we really see a big echo throughout the community on this short paper that really tries to lay down in very concrete terms objectives for the next years. Now, immediately when we were working on the charter, the questions started coming that we have these objectives. Now, how do we get there? What do we need to do? And as Kate said, the booklet really tries to define for the first time, if we want to reach these 5 objectives, clear targets that were defined in the Zero Debris Charter, what do we need to do? And we started really breaking it down as a community, working together collaboratively, using the best expertise of each of the participants to define clearly needs. So what certain users and partners need to be done, even if it's not necessarily their field of expertise, and enablers as solutions that different elements of the community could provide. So this booklet defining the what became really what should be a tool to enhance the communication across the community and enhance the collaboration, what we call capacity building. And that's how we have seen it from the beginning, and we're really happy to see when we actually issued it about a month ago, that this was very well achieved. And as Zari had a chance to say, it was an enormous amount of data and inputs that we had to process during this process, but that again shows the strength of this community. Now, recalling the timeline, when we were still working on the charter, we had a final workshop in the Clean Space days of 2023, in the month of October 2023, and already there we started acting on saying, how do we go from these targets that are in the charter that was still in the final draft form, let's say, how do we go from there to concrete actions? And we started mapping what were the needs of different partners in the Zero Debris Charter and what were solutions that were out there. So this was really the genesis of it, and of the booklet, and we started then in January, which again may echo a bit what is happening right now, with a webinar where we had a very broad participation again, to try to define a draft 0 and what would be this booklet. Afterwards, we brought it to the Zero Debris Week, and we closed it, this discussion, in the Clean Space days in October again. So you see that it kind of closes the cycle, but already there in 2024, October, when we were doing the Clean Space Days 24 and this workshop, people started thinking, what comes next? And even if the release was done just 1 month after, so actually in January, but we started having the final issue ready by December. We already in October, we started thinking, but maybe we could actually develop databases, have a website. How do we govern the booklet, and how do we evolve, and what other topics should be brought in there, and should we go into more granularity, or should we actually increase the number of topics that are addressed? So there was already a lot of discussion, and that again, I think will be a very important starting point for a new cycle that is starting today, that is where do we go from here with the booklet. Just to reinforce, and I think was also very clear in Kate's presentation, the strength of this community is really to have such a broad representation of expertise, stakeholders of different, let's say, layers of the space sector, between operators, integrators, technology providers, startups, astronomers. So this really made it a very not only whole and complete, but also very useful, because everybody could really talk to each other and understand the challenges each other is facing. And that was, again, replicated, I think, today when we see the amount of participants and the people who registered. Now, the role of ESA quickly, because I think it's important to always emphasize it. ESA has started this initiative as part of the Protect Accelerator, but from the beginning, as Quentin was presenting in the beginning, the idea was to do it for the community, by the community, and for the community. And from the beginning, it has been a collaborative process where ESA has in the beginning provided more support to the communities in the initial phases, but we are really planning and pushing so that this build becomes really full ownership of the community. And even if ESA facilitates some activities like the webinar we are in today, the idea is that moving on, we will try to build more and more collaborative structures and to have more and more participation of all actors in the organization of Zero Debris initiatives, so that everybody can actually bring more of their expertise and their own opinions and insights. So this brings me to the next part, that is, what do we plan to do next with this booklet? And again, this stems a lot from the meetings we had in the Clean Space Days in 2024. The goal here, again, is to really distribute more and more the responsibility and the coordination of the booklet, and also to decide together where to go. So after the discussions we had in the last year, we said once we have issued the booklet, we'll really start to prepare the future structures and discuss together what we need to do now. And the how a bit, as Kate was saying. So how each of us can use the booklet, how can we evolve and create other structures that even bring us closer to our objective, that is to really go towards a zero debris future. And so you will see in the next slides, but we are preparing a call for volunteers of people who would like to take a leading role, take part of the steering committee of the booklet. This will go on in the next months, going towards the Zero Debris Week in June. And after that, we believe that we'll be also in conditions to start working on evolutions of the booklet or other tools that will help the community. So as I said, the first step is really to go back to all of you, asking how you are contributing, how you can contribute, asking what you want to, how do you want to be involved, trying to also get feedback from you on the structure of the governance of this booklet. You can see here already the QR and the link. I ask all of you to please, we'll send it also by email, but to connect to this form and feedback. We'll use all of this to prepare the Zero Debris Week and what is its agenda that we have been starting to draft together with the editing group of the booklet, but that we would like really to get your inputs on. And this survey will be open until the 6th of March, so you have a few 3 weeks to contribute, and we'll try to use your feedback really to already go back to you and prepare what we call a call for volunteers for participating in this steering of the future versions of the booklet. Here is really an open call. In principle, what was discussed in the during the Clean Space Days was that the steering community would have, in order to have more specialized discussions, we would have technical groups, technical domains that would be led by someone that would then belong to a steering group that all together would decide where to go and be sure that we harmonize inputs across the different technical domains. You have seen in Zaria's presentation how the booklet is already structured around technical topics, and this will be, let's say, the initial point for what we will do next. So we'll try to go deeper on each of them. We'll try to see which tools we need in each of them, and I'll try to share as well more with the community. That could be through databases, could be through websites. This is something that we'll need to discuss together. And so with this, I get to the end of my presentation, but I would like to already bring to the floor some ideas about what we would like to see in the Zero Debris Week in June. It will take place physically from the 10th to the 13th of June in Izok in Germany. And there we expect to have basically two parts. One, what we call a Zero Debris Symposium, where we'll also look at non-technical aspects of the Zero Debris Initiative. We'll try to also promote similar exchanges as we had on the technical domain in other domains like the regulatory one, standardization, etc. And also to discuss future orientations of this initiative and the community. And then we'll also have dedicated sessions to the technical booklet and the evolution of it. So one of the points, something that we started doing here today, would be to understand how this tool is being used by each one of you. Also, as Kate said, every organization will have its own expertise and may address some of the topics in the booklet, but not all of them. And it will be very nice to map how each of the organizations involved in the booklet is aiming to use it and to exploit it, and how which topics, needs, and enablers are being addressed by each of you. In the Zero Debris Week, as we mentioned before, we also would like to agree on how we will govern the booklet evolutions from now on, trying to really define this steering committee and the roadmap for improvement. So also to decide what's next, what are the tools we want to put in place, who takes responsibility. So we will be working a lot on what are the next steps and how we will implement them. Also through the establishment of community tools and how altogether we can keep and improve the collaboration that we have started very successfully with the booklet and the charter before that. So this concludes my presentation. I hope it makes the next steps a bit more clear to all of you, and I really hope we can count with all of you also moving forward. Thank you very much, and I think we'll go now to the Q&A session. So don't hesitate to put your questions on the Q&A tab.
Yes, thank you very much, Thiago, for this very clear explanations on how the booklet was developed and of the next steps. So now it's indeed time for the Q&A session, and so I will let Callum and organize it all and answer different questions and ask the speakers to answer them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can see a nod from Diego, thank you. All right, so we have some questions already. Some of the practical ones of, are we sharing the slides after the session? We intend to, but we need to double check permissions. And if we are able to share the slides, they'll be on the Indigo page where you're registered for this event, so you can check them afterwards. So I think the first question I have is from Alessandro Rossetti, who says, after attending the drafting sessions and being aware that the Zero Debris Charter is not binding and the booklet is a collection of leads and enablers, is there any suggestion on how to move forwards to develop common methodologies and models for standardized modeling of risks? So quite a technical question. So the question is, how do we make the jump from the booklet to regulators adopting common models and methodologies? Is there anyone who'd like to propose an answer for that?
I think I can start, and if someone wants to complement, please go ahead. The way I see it, this is something really to be discussed in the Zero Debris Week, of course, because we need to also discuss what would be the best approach to that. I mean, we cannot guarantee that national verification methodologies would be the same as, for example, ESA applies or others. We can definitely share knowledge and try to agree as a community on tools that could be made available or that could be beneficial or that are missing and should be developed moving on towards the verification of each of these requirements. We have been doing also some internal work in ESA, but I imagine that other agencies as well. I think there is a clear need. Maybe this is something to be addressed in between, I would say, the two elements of the Zero Debris Week as well, to discuss how we go on in a more broad regulatory aspects, and how do we share knowledge that comes from the technical realm, and maybe there could be some broader consensus on the technical realm. How do we bring this to the regulatory layer? And I think this is a very good point to discuss in the Zero Debris Week. I don't know if any of my colleagues wants to comment as well.
I'm happy to just add to that as well. I think the booklet itself was really good in highlighting just how many times we use the word standardized or consensus or, guidelines. I think Callum and Vinny and a few other people did a great job at narrowing down to what we think are the real key ones in which we need a more agreed approach on how we're doing things. But it just highlighted that like nothing is standardized in the way that we do things. So I think the booklet is kind of the first step towards that. It's showing us where we need to focus on. How we go about doing that, completely agree with Thiago. That's going to be, a long and complicated process. I think also there's not going to be one way of doing it. So, ESA has the standardized interfaces working group that are working on that aspect of standardization. In the UK, we're running a sandbox with our regulators to work on the licensing aspect and how we obtain licenses for these kind of missions. So I think it's going to be a lot of different initiatives. I think the technical booklet and the Zero Debris community as a whole is just good at bringing together all those initiatives and making sure that we're not duplicating work or working against each other.
Actually, if I may just react on that. So I completely concur with both what Thiago and Zarya said. That first of all, at the Zero Debris Week, we will start with the second edition of the Zero Debris Future Symposium that many of you have attended last year. That is reflecting more on, let's say, business policy and regulations, and how what could be the contribution of the charter, the booklet, and overall the activities of the community to this discussion. And especially, I want to emphasize what Zarya said, that one of the first steps is also to learn what each of the members of the community is doing with regards to that point. So how are you all interacting with your respective regulators? What is the appetite of the regulators in your respective state for the work you are doing? Do they see the efforts of the Zero Debris community as some important source of inspiration to really feel the pulse of the space sector on these topics? So all this discussion on understanding, because at the moment, as you all know, space regulations are different country by country. We may see what happens at the level of the EU, but that also doesn't include the whole of Europe. So the question on how, let's say, not necessarily pushing the adoption of this or that methodology, but how the work that we are doing here can be a source of serious inspiration for regulatory work. This is extremely important, and we'll be addressing it frankly in during the Zero Debris Week.
All right, thank you, everyone. So following up on a question again about the Zero Debris Week. So Thomas Reiter asks, can we imagine discussing aspects of manufacturing, surveillance, detection, catalog generation, and operators in splinter sessions? So I suppose the wider question is, what will the focus of the Zero Debris booklet sessions of the week be, and will they have a technical focus or otherwise? I can already say that this is something that we're still considering and still shaping how these sessions will play out. But would any of my colleagues like to provide their suggestions or provide any response to that question?
Well, I can start again, but I think that's exactly what the survey will also help us do, to shape what are the topics to be discussed. Manufacturing in particular was one of the topics that was part of a specific chapter in the booklet linked to the evolution towards the circular economy in space. That in the past we have discussed, should we go to a lower level of granularity or not? I think this is actually one of the routes that could be followed in the evolution of the booklet. We need to discuss that together in the Zero Debris Week. But if these are topics that are of your concern, and yours and the community, I think it should come up during the survey, and it will really help also the editing group to shape the different sessions and to decide what we will discuss there in practice.
Right, thank you, Diego. Anyone else like to provide any inputs, or shall I move on to another question? Okay, so I think changing focus a little bit, we had a very technical question on aluminium oxide, which is a slight change of pace. So the question was on using aluminium alloys as the main structure of a satellite and the ablation product forms of aluminium oxides and the impacts on the atmosphere. The question is, how should we address this? I think it's an interesting point to raise that some of what we list in the booklet aren't entirely technological needs, but also areas where we need to expand our knowledge. So in particular, in the case of ablation projects from atmospheric entry, this is in chapter 6 of the booklet. One of the key enablers is improving our understanding and figuring out what we don't know about these processes. Would anyone like to complement that point?
Yeah, I would just add that from the Q&A question, also ask if there's a compatibility list or something like this. The first, something we discussed in Chapter 6 and also part of Chapter 5, because we see different demisability products and we're talking about re-entry burns, how that would possibly be addressed. So in the first version, we didn't necessarily have a list of materials to say this would be good, this would be bad, because part of the things that we noticed is that there's just not enough data yet. We're still looking to get this type of material data. I think it's one of the gaps that we've highlighted within the booklet as well in between these chapters. So in this case, it could be something that we consider maybe in the next iteration of the booklet, if some sort of list or annex would be useful or applicable, and if so, how would we draw that up at this time with the knowledge that we do hold within the industry? There's a few things there on how we improve the models through material knowledge and how we're getting that material information, whether it's through actual in-orbit tests or re-entry tests as much as possible, or through plasma wind tunnel, etc. So this is something that I think is still quite a large gap that we're working on, but it's definitely part of the developments within the booklet.
Right, thanks, Kate. Okay, moving on to the next question then, which is more programmatic, I guess. Are there any activities related to the Zero Debris Charter during the 9th European Conference on Space Debris? So, Quentin, Tiago, would you like to provide an input there?
There will be definitely some discussions around the implementation of Zero Debris and how to bring these new targets and requirements into the design and how to translate it into technology. So yes, it will be addressed, but there will not be a specific workshop on Zero Debris there, as it is not the target of that conference. But it's also unavoidable to talk about it. So there'll be definitely some some sessions and roundtables where this topic will be touched.
All right, I'm having a look through the Q&A. I think we have a couple of last questions. So if anyone has a burning question they haven't asked yet, please submit it now before we close the session. A perennial question, I suppose. Somebody has asked, will there be ESA grants for research programs on the topics of the booklet? Tiago, would you mind taking this one?
So here, I think, as for other organizations, the ESA will definitely try to address in its journey towards zero debris the implementation of activities and grants, as you call it, to research and development activities that are trying to answer to some of the needs and enablers that were identified in the booklet as much as possible, and we'll try to map our proposed activities and towards the booklet, as Kate suggested they were doing also in OHB. As for any other organization, I believe that no one can alone cover all the scope of the Zero Debris booklet, and that's exactly why it was also defined, right? So to really try to have a collaborative capacity building without being only driven by one organization. So the answer is yes. It will be there will be activities and proposals linked to the needs identified, but we'll need to work on this all together and in parallel with other organizations and funding sources.
Okay, thank you. So a final question we've not covered, which I think was before Tiago's presentation, was: is there an opportunity for signatures of the Zero Debris Charter to collaborate in the technical booklet? There will be indeed. The easiest way to do that is to fill out the survey that Tiago mentioned. This will be shared on the Indigo page of this event, the link to the survey as well. And that's the way to get involved in future developments with the booklet. So, with no other questions, I think we can close the Q&A, and I'll hand over to Tiago for the closing word, and then we'll finish the webinar. So thank you all for submitting your questions.
Thanks everyone again for participating. Very successful turnout as well. Thanks for the organization to Sash and Callum that really made it happen. So good job. And once again, I really hope this was a starting point for a new cycle and that we'll see each other in June in person in ASOC, and we can do one of our intense working sessions where we go towards a concrete next step as we normally do. I think that has been a constant in this community, and I think there's a lot of potential to move on now that we have defined this starting point, and was very useful to get together again and see that it is already being used in practice by all our organizations that were here today. So thanks for everybody for participating, and to everyone presenting, and I hope to see you all very soon. And please don't forget to answer the survey, because that will be a very important step already for the preparation of the Zero Debris Week. Thanks everybody.
Yes, thank you all, and maybe see you for other events. Bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.